First and foremost, I want to give all praise, honor, and glory to Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahushua Ba'ashem Rokakwadash. Yahweh is who this world ignorantly calls God. Yahweh Shai is who this world ignorantly calls Jesus. Bahashem means in the name, Rakah means spirit, and Qudash means holy. And that's all in the Paleo Hebrew. Also, want to give double honors to the elder bishops and apostles of Great Millstone that taught me this truth. In today's video, I wanted to go into how the world will let you down, but the Lord won't. Okay, and this video was inspired by something that happened today and to the brother. And pretty much me and the bro, work the same job. And, I come into work today and they essentially, out of nowhere, said, "Yep, everybody, next Tuesday, you guys are all out of jobs." And, a lot of people were there surprised, shocked. And ultimately that just made me realize, it put me back in that perspective that, this world will let you down. And you can't set your heart, your affection on this world because it will always let you down. And that was a prime example. A lot of people pride themselves in their jobs, thinking that they're valuable, that they're an essential worker. But when you're dealing with one of these big corporations, you're nothing but a cog in the machine, right? If you break, hey, they'll just get somebody else to fill in the spot. Right? You're replaceable. So let's read this in Matthew chapter 6 and verse 19 because this essentially sums it up. It says, "Lay not up for yourselves treasures upon earth, where moth and rust doth corrupt, and where thieves break through and steal. But lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust doth corrupt, and where thieves do not break through nor steal." Right? So when it's going into laying up your treasures, okay, let's go into that word in the Greek there. Let's see what it says. Treasures, thesaurus. The place in which good and precious things are collected and laid up. Right? Deposit, wealth. Okay, and when you read the verse after that, it says, "For where your treasure is, there will your heart be also." Right? So ultimately dealing with, what you deem valuable. What you deem valuable, that's where your heart is going to be at. And you can't look at this world as being valuable because it will always let you down. And you got to really recognize the scenario that this is not the kingdom. Right? We are still in hell. And the conditions of hell is that, hey, this is a low condition. So lay not up for yourselves treasures upon earth, where moth and rust doth corrupt, and where thieves break through and steal. Right, going into how, hey, if you dedicate your whole life to building up these material things, hey, that can be taken in an instant. Right, somebody can come and steal your car. Right, you devote your life to your woman, guess what? The Lord could take her out. Somebody could kill her. Right, you devote, hey, your life to cars, to houses. Somebody could rob your house. Right, you got all this money. And guess what? Stock market could crash and you lose all your investments. Right, and you're back to zero. Right, so whatever way you slice it or dice it, the treasures that you lay upon earth can be corrupted. But if you lay up those treasures in heaven, nobody can touch that. And that's what really matters, is laying up those treasures in heaven towards Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahushai. Because the Lord will never let you down no matter what. Right, the Lord, if you believe in Him, that is a sure guarantee. Okay, it makes me think of the scripture in Sirach, the second chapter, in verse 2, other known as Ecclesiasticus. In verse 10 it says, "Look at the generations of old, and see, did ever any trust in the Lord and was confounded? Or did any abide in His fear and was forsaken? Or whom did He ever despise that called upon Him?" Right, the answer is nobody. Right? Nobody was ever let down by the Lord, confounded, if they wholeheartedly trusted in Him. Right? He always came through. Verse 11, "For the Lord is full of compassion and mercy and long suffering and very pitiful, and forgiveth sins, and saveth in time of affliction." And that's one of the most important things, is that you got to know that Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahushai is always got your back. And that's the spirit me and the bro in, is that, yeah, we might have lost our jobs, but guess what? The Lord gonna deliver. The Lord gonna put us in a better situation. right? This job was nothing but a learning experience to build us up, right? And this is part of those trials where the Lord is putting us through that fire to see if we really believe in Him. So, the Lord Yahweh Ba'Shem Yahweh Shai told us that the righteous one, we're gonna suffer straits. We're gonna go through all types of tribulations, and it's all to see how you react, right? If you still keep your integrity. So let's now go to 1 Corinthians chapter 9 and verse 25. It says, "And every man that striveth for the mastery is temperate in all things. Now they do it to obtain a corruptible crown, but we an incorruptible." Right? And going into what people work for. Right? All these people nowadays, it's all about, money, hoes, clothes, the material life. And they're all doing that to obtain a corruptible crown, because of that crown can be tainted. All that can be taken away, especially in Esau society. Here it is, you miss you miss your tax payments by 2-3 months, and they're out here talking about, we're gonna seize your property. Oh yeah, you got a house paid off. Hey, we don't care. We're gonna come and take it if you don't pay $2,000-3,000. That's the reality of these devils, man. It talks about how he transgresseth, through his law, through his policy. Okay, he brings forth that wickedness. It says, "But we an incorruptible," right? Because nobody can touch the treasures that you are laying up in heaven, right? All those days that you fast, you pray, you read, that is laying up treasures in heaven. So when you're in a jam, guess what? Yahweh Bashim Yahushai gonna look at all the work you done for him, and he's gonna be like, you know what? Hey, this is a diligent brother, diligent sister, and I'm gonna help him out. I'm gonna help her out. So that's what we're looking for. Okay, we storing up those treasures so that in Jacob's trouble, the Lord looks at us and deems us acceptable. Let's read this in Philippians 3 and verse 8. I'll start at Matthew chapter 19 and verse 29, and this is something I heard the brother talk about today. Amwang Abari, he said, "And everyone that hath forsaken houses or brethren, or sisters, or father, or mother, or wife, or children, or lands for my name's sake, shall receive 100-fold and shall inherit everlasting life." Right, and this was Peter being answered by Yahweh Shai as to what we shall receive, for forsaking all. And the brother was going into how when it talks about forsaking, it's not talking about just leaving your house, leaving your woman. It's essentially being in the mentality of you've counted it all lost. Okay, you're in the mentality that, hey, if anything gets in front of Yahweh Bashim Yahweh Shai, hey, I'm gonna have to just let that shit go. And that's the mentality the Lord is looking for. Is He wants men and women out there that nobody is gonna get in front of him. Okay, nothing at all. Because if you let something get in front of Yahweh Bashim Yahweh Shai, hey, guess what? Hey, ultimately, your crown is being taken. Ultimately, those treasures that you're storing up, hey, are being, are for nothing. Because if you lose this faith, guess what? All those good works that you did are for nothing. So you can't get nothing. You can't let nothing get in front of Yahweh Bashim Yahweh Shai. It literally says multiple times. Joshua 1 and 8 is an example. I think in Matthew 2, it talks about how seek ye the kingdom of heaven first, and then all these things shall be added unto you. Right? You want success? Guess what? You got to focus on the Lord before anything. And that's what it's going into when it talks about forsaking. Right? Is Yahweh Shai said it. He said, hey, if your left hand offend thee, it is better to go into the kingdom of heaven maimed. Right? He said, hey, if your left hand is blocking you off, cut that shit off. And that was symbolic for if you got anything that's holding you back or getting in between you and the Lord, you got to cut that shit off. And that's the forsaking. So, so this ties perfectly into the lesson to today of you got to forsake this world and always be in the mentality that, hey, this shit is temporal. That's the reality. This shit is temporal. Everything can be taken away from you in an instant. And you got to be ready that at a drop of a dime to let everything go. At a drop of a dime, you got to be ready to let everything go. And that's the mentality that's going to take to get through Jacob's trouble and to ultimately overcome the chip. Because the chip, that's the mentality that's gonna get you through it. Is you're gonna be hit with that situation of damn. It's either I take this chip and I save all my material things. You know, I have pleasure for a little bit, or I don't take the chip and I forsake all. I just trust in Yahweh Hashem and Yahushua completely, and I lose everything in this world. And that's what the elect are gonna do. Hey, Lord willing, I'm a part of that number. So let's read this in Philippians 3 and close off. Verse 8 says, Yea, doubtless, and I count all things but loss, for the excellency of the knowledge of Hamashiach Yahushua my Lord, for whom I have suffered the loss of all things, and do count them but dung, that I may win Hamashiach. Right, so let's read this in the NLT. It says, Yes, everything else is worthless when compared with the infinite value of knowing Hamashiach Yahushua my Lord. For his sake I have discarded everything else, counting it all as garbage, so that I could gain Hamashiach. Right, and that's the mentality we in, is that everything else outside of Yahweh Ba'Shem, Yahushua Ba'Shem, Rakakudash is garbage. Okay? It is going to be discarded. It's worthless. Because it can all be corruptible. It can all be tainted. But the Lord's faith, the Lord can never be tainted. So, I'll leave it there. Hopefully it was edifying. With that, and give all praise, honor, and glory to Yahweh Ba'Shem, Yahushua Ba'Shem, Rakakudash, and double honors to the elder bishops and apostles of Great Millstone that taught me this truth. Shalom to elect. Shalom.